figure out that sign. What does that mean?
Well, my blisters are real sore, but I want to be able to do that mayor's walk. There's a spaghetti dinner.
You tell everybody I'm going 10 miles an hour.
It says here you're going 12. Why would I do that?
Really training for a marathon or a bike, you have to do hills because the triathlon has some hills that's over in this area, and you do have to go up some hills and down some hills, and the marathon has up rolling hills, uphill, downhill. It comes 26 miles down the highway down into St. George, and a lot of people think because the top is a mile high and the bottom is a half a mile high, so you drop 2,400 feet. So you do have a lower elevation at the finish line, but unless you're used to running downhill, people really get cramps if they haven't run down, because you take big steps and you're bracing your steps because it's 7% grade for about 3 miles, and it's really tough because you're taking great big strides and steps, and so many people get cramps in their quads. And so I learned the hard way that you gotta practice on hills. And they actually say if you always train on flat and you always train going slow, then you're gonna run slow. But you're supposed to do fast and slow, because that's supposedly a lot better training. And so I forget what they call it, but yesterday when I was doing it, I heard it once before, they said if you run a mile and then walk a minute and run a mile and walk a minute, because you can walk 4 miles an hour, so you really don't lose that much time. And if you did a whole marathon, running a mile and walking a minute, you could still make good time. And so that's what I was kind of doing yesterday. And this guy that won and broke the record today, he was less than a 5-minute mile. And he ran 26.2 miles at less than 5 minutes per mile.
Wow.
A new course record, 2 hours and 14 minutes. The old record was 2 hours and 15 minutes. But then I heard that they had a pretty good tailwind at the start. So coming down the canyon, if you have a pretty good tailwind, it might give you a little bit of a shot to keep you going. If you got a 15-20 mile wind, you got a little push. So it might have helped him. Now the guy that won it the last 2 years, he was from this area, and he came in third today. But he did win it the last 2 years. But a lot of the top 10 were people that have run it so many times. Oh, they were good. They were all within 3 or 4 minutes from each other. And they have the elite runners right at the start of the start line. And then you're supposed to back up the street. They have people holding balloons, like a 3.5 hour marathon, a 3 hour, 45-minute marathon, a 4 hour marathon, and every 15 minutes. And you're supposed to line up with the pacer. this pacer has a string with 3 balloons on it and a sign that says 4 hours and 15 minutes or whatever. And if you want to complete it, these pacers are so good. And I watched them come in today, and every one of them was right on the money. I looked up at the finish line, and if it said 3 hours and 30 minutes, it said 3 hours and 30 minutes. The pacers were that good. And the 4 hour, the 4.5 hour, they were that good. And if you stay with the pacer, they do vary their speed a little bit. If it's uphill, they'll slow down a little bit, save their energy. If it's downhill, they'll take a little bigger stride. But they have it set so they are right on target. And 2 years ago, when Guy and Diana came here, Guy ran for me. He ran the marathon for me. I always wanted to run with him because he and Diana run marathons, but I could not get him registered. They had a lottery system, they had filled up, and I could not get him registered. So I decided he would run for me and take my bib, and I would hang around Diana, and I would do the mayor's walk, the 2-mile walk. And so that was the deal. And so Guy ran for me, but the chip that he had on his shoelace kept track of him, and Diana was able to trace him. If she wanted to see where he was along the route, she would do something with her smartphone, and it would say, Guy Wynn is at mile 18, and his pace is like 9 miles an hour. Or she kept track of him all along the way, and we were listening to it. Even at the start, he was doing like a 9-minute mile, a 10-minute mile. He was really going fast, and I thought, he hasn't trained going that fast, and he's going to burn out before he finishes. And Diana thought he was going to burn out before he finished too, but somehow he was smart enough to know that he needed to back off a little bit and save his energy. So I think he came in at 4 hours and 15 minutes. And that was real good because he was so busy during the summertime, he didn't get a chance to run. I think he only did about 2 long runs in preparation for the marathon. He did a few little short runs, but he never ran any races, and he hadn't done any long runs. So I was really worried that he would last. Now, our neighbor down in Arizona, his name was Jay Allen. He was Tom's age. He and his wife are runners, and they've done both the St. George Marathon, and I've run with them before. And Tom and Jay were pretty close, but Jay hadn't practiced a long run, and he run out of energy. And then Jan's son, his name is Ben, he ran cross country in high school, and he was the top 5 in the state of Idaho. He was really good, but it was a cross country, and it was like a 5K or a 10K maximum run. He had never, ever run a marathon. And when he started up here, he was right with the elite runners, right up at the front of the line, and he ran half of the marathon with the elite runners. He was really moving. But about mile 18, he hit the wall, and he couldn't run anymore. He ended up walking about half of the distance to the finish line, and I think he didn't come in until almost 4 hours. But he was an elite runner, but not for a whole marathon. Maybe a half, maybe a 10K or a 5K, but not a whole marathon. And I think he really felt bad because he burned out. They call it hitting the wall. So you do have to have some long runs, and you have to have your endurance, and you just have to practice. But when I was in my prime, I figured I was running at least 50 miles a week in training, and I would ride a bike 100 miles a week in training. Now, this physical therapist, he said, you got to do cross training. He says, if you do cross training, you really don't have to run every single day. You don't have to swim every day, and you don't have to ride a bike every day, but you have to work out every single day to get your cardiovascular built up. And he was a racer, but he said for a marathon, he was down to 25 miles a week. If he did 25 miles a week running, he figured that was good enough because he swam and he biked and he did something every single day. And he was really, really good. And so that's kind of the philosophy I started taking, is cross training. And they say that's probably better than just going a long distance and a lot slower. Because if you run like 20 miles once a month, you can run it, but you run slow. And when you run a marathon, you can get there and still have energy, but you run slow. And so that was kind of a lesson to me, is either you gotta do interval training where you run fast and you run slow, you run fast and you run slow. And then there was a new strategy that came out this year, and it was somewhere in